In the middle of that exchange of lethal or would-be lethal force, in the middle of that military confrontation, it's not hard to understand why Iran might roll out its mobile anti-aircraft systems to defend the Tehran airport or sites nearby in case America was going to fly jets into Iran as part of this military confrontation. And logically, of course, what this also means is that there's no reason to think this would have happened were it not for this military confrontation between the United States and Iran. The flight that was shot down, that was a normal passenger aircraft flight between Tehran and Kyiv. That flight goes 5 times a week, direct from Kyiv to Tehran and back. A Ukrainian Airlines flight. The major European carrier Lufthansa also regularly flies in and out of the Tehran airport. Today, they had a passenger aircraft on its way into Tehran from Frankfurt in Germany when these news reports popped that actually it had been an anti-aircraft missile fired from near the Tehran airport that took down that passenger jet and killed 176 people yesterday. That Lufthansa flight was already in the air on its way to the Tehran airport when those reports broke. That Lufthansa flight turned around midair and went back to Frankfurt rather than land in Tehran in these circumstances. But passenger travel, passenger air travel in and out of Tehran is a normal thing. Flights don't get shot down. This flight got shot down because of what was happening between Iran and the U.S. military this week. At least that is what it appears. And that is why it says on the front page of the New York Times right now, quote, the new intelligence suggests that the loss of lives from the downing of a civilian passenger plane was a direct result of heightened tensions between the U.S. and Iran. And so, yes, moment in history here, right? Big picture here. We are in the middle of the impeachment of the President of the United States for only the 3rd time in U.S. history. In the middle of that impeachment, as he is awaiting the start of his Senate impeachment trial, this president, for reasons that remain unexplained, decided to launch this military strike against Iran, which set off inevitable retaliatory measures from Iran. Military confrontation between our two countries. And now there is a robust fight in Congress trying to get the White House, trying to get the administration to come up with some coherent explanation for why he launched that strike. What was that for? Whether or not it was legal. That's why you're seeing this war powers vote tonight in the House and soon in the Senate. But to the core human question of whether or not launching that strike on Iran a few days ago made us safer or made us less safe, whether it was risky and reckless or whether it was something that was for the good of mankind, well, the body count for what was just set off here appears to now include 176 civilians from Sweden and Germany and Britain and Afghanistan and Iran and Ukraine and Canada.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.